The Welterweight Summit, years in the making, is finally upon us. Welcome on in. Errol Spence Jr., Terence Crawford, the four-belt welterweight unification for the Undisputed Championship is on the line, of course, July 29th. Showtime pay-per-view from Las Vegas. But today, the start of a two-day bi-coastal press conference tour to set the stage for the big one later this summer. Brian Campbell, Luke Thomas, co-hosts of the Showtime Sports award-winning digital combat sports series Morning Combat, will be anchoring today's coverage here from our studio in Jersey City, New Jersey, but throwing it out to Los Angeles very shortly for day one, like I mentioned, of this two-day tour, Times Square in New York City tomorrow. But Luke Thomas, I said years in the making. We've known for a long time how big this fight could be. It's finally here. What are the feelings? What are the emotions? We're getting what we wanted.
I think a little relief because of all the fits and starts. I think there were some concerns you saw as little leaks were getting out in the media. People like, I'm not going to believe it until they're facing off in the ring, which you can understand given some of the frustrations in terms of the roadblocks. And then the fight was almost made and then it didn't. But listen, we finally crossed the finish line. It is now a thing that is going to take place July 29th, of course, in Las Vegas, Nevada. And BC, here we're talking about this fight today. I was wondering, like, what do we even need to say about a fight like this, given how much there is in terms of its richness and how it's certainly interesting style contrast and the history on the line here and the stakes as well. It's the fight for the #1 pound-for-pound slot in all of boxing. That's really what is going on here. I know we just came off of the Tank Davis, of course, and Ryan Garcia fight, which was something like the face of, at least that was some of the marketing around it, but this truly is, no doubt about it, the winner is going to be the pound-for-pound best fighter in the sport. It's a long time coming. I am so excited to see them finally face off and get a taste of what it's going to be like on July 29th.
Of course, the fight presented by premier boxing champions, and when we talk about seeing them face-to-face, they will do that today in Los Angeles. We'll be throwing shortly to our colleague Brian Custer with more coverage live tomorrow, New York City. But as Luke said, to set the stage here, no shortage of stakes. If you ask any boxing fan, casual or hardcore, what is the best fight that could be made? It typically centers around this one. First time we'll be crowning an undisputed champion in the welterweight division in this four-belt era. But it's the biggest fight since what? Probably Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao in 2015 from the standpoint of the anticipation and the stakes. That fight was for a lot of the things that this one is. Best fighter in the division at the moment. Best fighter in the sport, pound for pound potentially. And best fighter in this new era, post-Mayweather-Pacquiao, to find out in the money division, the pay-per-view division at welterweight, who is that last man standing? Skill versus skill, styles contrast. It doesn't get any better than this matchup.
And there's more ways you could go. Both guys are coming off of 6 title defenses. Both guys are undefeated. The winner here would, of course, ostensibly be the first time in the four-belt modern era that the welterweight division was entirely undisputed by a single owner of all the belts. I mean, every which way you cut it, there is significance. Every which way you cut it, there is history. Every which way you cut it, there are stakes and enjoyment and everything. Everything you could possibly want, at least on paper, is in Spence versus Crawford. It has it all. As you pointed out, of all of the very best fights you could make in boxing, irrespective of weight class, which ones would they be? This has to be either at the top of the list or certainly in close contention for it. Boxing just basically doesn't come much better.
Both fighters unbeaten, huge knockout totals, still at the peak of their physical and mental primes. But it took a while to build to, and I think that anticipation is going to play off, and the potential, obviously, for a classic with so much at stake. But not every fight with big stakes ends up being that. This one, though, you've got two hungry champions whose ability has screamed for years that we could be looking at all-time greats here. Well, now this generation, we get our Sugar Ray Leonard versus Thomas Hearns, our De La Hoya versus Trinidad, right? Our Mayweather versus Pacquiao, as mentioned, that summit meeting to decide it all. I'm fired up. I'm fired up. This one is bigger than the rest. It feels different. It feels more special. But Luke, we're going to see now as we get on the road to start to building the promotion to get here, how that changes the fight at all. Will these two become bitter enemies on the ride here? Sportsmen, how do you anticipate we'll see when they go eyes to eyes today for the first time?
They have interesting merch. One wants to fry a fish. The other one is making clever use of the word bud. You can go and look that up for yourself. But nonetheless, they both seem motivated. I mean, listen, to get this fight made, both of them actually negotiated with one another. Of course, there were other parties in play, but they had to have a direct line of communication, which is interesting because remember that big Twitter spat stat that they had after the first time it failed back in November, I think a little prior to that to make that fight. You didn't know if it was going to happen, but these two guys have real respect for each other. I mean, listen, there's simply no denying. If you ask anybody who watches boxing, who are the two best welterweights on earth, you're only going to get these two guys answered there. And both of them know that. Both of them understand the history. But BC, it kind of gets to a point that you raise, which is there are really interesting questions about this fight as well. For all of these guys' prowess, how they match up will, of course, expose some vulnerabilities along the way for someone like Spence. What about the car accident? What about some of the time off that he's had? For Bud, he's 35. He's a little bit older. What is that going to mean in a weight class? Obviously, the lower you go, the more unforgiving age can be. Plenty of reason for fantastic optimism. And, of course, that's really all that we have. But plenty of interesting questions along the way about who might get tripped up with what by the time they fight.
Yeah, I'm interested to see who will start to plant some seeds, who will try to act more like the alpha, act more like the A side when it comes to the debate on who's going to win this fight.
Do you, listen, Tank and Ryan was a lot of fun. I'm not saying this won't be fun. You don't really have to sell Spence Crawford that hard. I mean, they're doing a media tour for the next 2 days. But what I mean to say is, do you really need to jazz it up with taking off the glasses theatrics? Probably not, but you may get some of that.
It could be a nice little sprinkle on top. Look, to me, I always say it, I believe the fight begins the day it's announced from that standpoint of planting those mental seeds to build toward the night, which in this case, of course, July 29th, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, and only on Showtime pay-per-view. But when we talk about this being such a perfect style contrast between two guys who can fight any style, can do it all in the ring, if we're talking about Errol Spence Jr., we know one of the most well-rounded forces of this modern era. He can box you out from the outside and shut you down like he did against unbeaten Mikey Garcia on pay-per-view, and he can walk you down and bring the fight to you, which is what he did last year in the big stadium in Dallas, Texas, right there, unifying welterweight titles against Yordenis Ugas by stoppage, by wearing him down. Luke, on the flip side, if Spence is this big southpaw that can do it all, how do you describe what Terence Crawford brings to the table?
Yeah, very different. I mean, both guys do share some real interesting similarities. Namely, they both take their time up front. They both do the first few rounds to get the diagnosing done, and then you begin to see the adjustments. But there are some really noteworthy differences beyond that. So, for example, Errol Spence is very much an activity guy, a volume guy, which isn't to say he's not a power puncher, because he absolutely is, especially to the body. Perhaps one of the most devastating body attackers in, frankly, all of boxing. He's really more of sort of a punishing force of nature. He is what we like to sometimes call, when we preview fights, is inevitable. He is just knocking on the door, and eventually, every time he's done it, they have answered, right? So he marches through and becomes that guy. And he has really had to push through in some big, important bouts. The Kell Brook one stands out to me as one of his more important and, I think, noteworthy victories. That's really what you kind of got in a guy like Errol Spence. For Bud Crawford, BC, he is a magician.
Abstract painter.
He is a painter, so he can make those adjustments late, and both guys can do not so much the reckless bite down on the mouthpiece, but who wants it more late, both can do it. But Crawford, much more of a very high fight IQ, clever type of diagnosis, specific surgeon to take things away from you over time. In many ways, kind of the heir to Floyd Mayweather as the guy who previously did that in all the big fights in boxing. So you've got this, both the guys have high fight IQ, but one has really, really high, and another one is this dominant body-punching force of nature. They're going to meet in the middle.
It's interesting. It's very rare that we compare anyone to the great unbeaten Floyd Mayweather, but I think Bud Crawford and Floyd Mayweather share that characteristic. When the big adjustment is made mid-fight, or sometimes with Bud Crawford, it can be as quickly as the second, third round. In his case, it's switching southpaw. Typically, the fight's over, just like in Floyd's great run once he diagnoses that. From that standpoint, Luke, they contrast perfectly because Spence is the upright southpaw, the more traditional style of fighter. But Spence inevitably will go southpaw, so it will be interesting, even in this matchup, how that changes things. Is he going to be able to change the tune and take over control of fights like he normally has done? Look at his biggest win to date at welterweight against Shawn Porter, making the adjustment late in a close fight and completely putting him away. Can you do that against Errol Spence? Haven't seen either of these guys lose before. We've barely seen either of them in major trouble, although they have been in exciting fights. It's all going to come together on the night to find out who's got the better tricks, who's got the better adjustments, who wants it more at the end of the day. That's the thing that I think is sort of underrated in this matchup. You have all the stakes, the 4 titles, all the grandeur and the royalty, and you certainly have all the skills on a pound-for-pound level. But Luke, if you were going to describe the similarities between Spence and Crawford, the backbone, the willingness to go into the trenches to get the fight done, which isn't always a natural prerequisite of every pay-per-view championship fighter. They both have that dog in them, and I think they're willing to bring it out on July 29th.
They're absolutely going to do that. Both guys are frankly known for having late, dominant pushes in fight, and not just that, not rallying out of some deficit. Usually it's them stepping, at least metaphorically speaking, of course, on their opponent's necks, right? It's sealing the deal. Of course, they can't stop every opponent every time, but I just mean that's when they really, for lack of a better description, BC, that's when they put it on them. That's when they really show who's in charge, leave no doubt, absolutely stick it to them. So the question is, when you have two, frankly, bulls like that, something is going to have to give, but it's really, really difficult to try and figure out which guy is going to be able to do that. Is it going to be the overall attack that gets off to frankly a bit of an earlier start, I think, in Spence relative to Crawford, that's going to make all that early gains that he can take advantage of later? Or is a wizard, a genius of boxing in Crawford going to be able to make the slick adjustments, the smart observations, all of the different tools in the Batman tool belt that he has to win? Is he going to pull one of those out for a lifeline and then, of course, seal the deal himself? I don't know. I really don't know. And I think most honest fans, I think they probably lean one way or the other. But if you really pressed them, I bet you they would concede this one is just hard to see how it goes.
Well, it's always a big deal when you get unbeaten champion against unbeaten champion and the royalty of a big unification. In this case, obviously, it's for the Undisputed Championship. But don't sleep on the pound-for-pound ramifications just the same. Obviously, this is an era that has more than a few competing for that top prize, and the number one pound-for-pound, really how you like it. Do you like Naoya Inoue? It was Canelo's time before that. Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury at heavyweight are in the conversation. But Spence and Crawford have both been either number 1, 2, or 3 in most people's top 10 for a while now. They get to go up against each other. How rare is it that you have all this at stake, but still whoever wins could exit that ring saying, I'm the best fighter in the world today? That was an element of Mayweather-Pacquiao. I remember Andre Ward and Sergey Kovalev in their first meeting in recent years had a similar type of setup, but it's rare when you can get two at this high of a level, having never faced defeat before and going up against each other for all the prizes, not just the title, not just this, that, all the prizes, the respect, and obviously a big deal financially in terms of a major event that is going to cross over far beyond the boxing world. This fight really does have it all. We're just going to sit back and watch it. July 29th, I mean, there's only so much you can say to set that stage of because they've already accomplished it all in the ring. It's already been set up for some time to get to this point. They've had common opponents. They've passed all the tests. They haven't faced each other yet, and that's why we're this fired up.
And I think maybe that's now sort of why this fight is happening. It's like, where else did they have to go? Now, of course, there are some conversations about win or lose, whether one or both fighters goes up to 154. That is obviously part of the future. Again, we'll see how things go. That's been something of the indication. But BC, like a fight with this kind of stakes, as we indicated, for the prizes that are up there, for the reputation enhancing or potentially damaging effects that could happen in an event of a loss, like all the ways in which this fight is important, it takes time to build and to create and actually get over the finish line for fights like that. It's easy to make the fights that don't necessarily have that much on the line. When there's huge stakes, people check the fine print. They double question themselves. They do everything they can to make sure that they're right for it. And I guess it wasn't right before. I wish it would have, of course, but we can't complain anymore. It's now done. They finally got to a position where all of these things were settled. By the way, I love the idea of a mutually enforceable rematch clause.
Sure.
So here's the reality. Pardon me. You may get not just one Spence Crawford, and I know I'm getting in front of my skis here. You may get two. Really is kind of an interesting year.
Got it, okay? I'll take Utah. Give me 2 if you got it. Maybe even 3 at the end of the day. Such a big deal. Such a monster fight. Tracing the origin of this fight is kind of hard. Some people can go back to 2018 and remember that Spence and Crawford were at the same fight. There were cameras there following them, and they both talked about the idea of fighting each other. Some have whispered seeing this matchup years even before that on the horizon. Do you remember which side you've leaned on the multi-year journey to get here in terms of which guy you think will win the fight? That's another big part of this matchup is we all have our internal biases or who we favor or who we think can get the nod raised. I can't remember a fight probably besides Mayweather-Pacquiao where my opinion changed so much in the ensuing years.
Yeah, I have a little bit of that. I mean, here's what I'll say. Just take my opinion for what it's worth, and I know there's going to be folks being like, that's not worth much. Fair enough that it's not worth much. But here is where I've come to at this point, subject to change. I have seen Bud Crawford do things that I don't know if I've seen other people do. I mean, we're talking about a level of extraordinary craftsmanship, frankly, in the art and science of boxing. But I think even with some of the questions about, remember, there was a long layoff before the Ugas fight, and there's been a long, I think, 15 or 16-month layoff since the Ugas fight. So there's plenty of questions about his activity, but also, of course, the difficulty that he had faced with the car accident and everything else. Nevertheless, even with all that, I have seen in the last, I don't know, 6 fights or so, I just think Errol Spence has fought and defeated better competition, basically, is what I would say. I think he's fought the better guys. I know they have some overlap, obviously, with Shawn Porter, and to that point, Shawn Porter made shorter work and easier work, I think. Excuse me, I should say Bud Crawford made shorter and easier work of Shawn Porter than
I wouldn't call
Errol.
it easy. I wouldn't call it
Not easy, but again, relatively speaking, who was that fight harder for? It was harder for Spence. But I would just say, in overall, I think Spence has done the more impressive body of work. But what does that mean for fight night?
Yeah, some of the boxing business ramifications of sides of the street and all that nonsense that the fans just want to worry about the fighters getting into the ring. Bud maybe hasn't had the same access, but he certainly handled the opposition he has had the ability to face. But Luke, when you look back at that run from Errol Spence Jr., you'd probably have to go back to Floyd Mayweather to find somebody who has had as big of a run with one big name unbeaten after another. That's the thing about Spence. We've got these questions about the long layoffs and coming back from the car accident and all of that. But boy, does he answer the call when the time is there. You were with me outside of Dallas last year for the unification bout against Yordenis Ugas. That was a train in Errol Spence Jr. that came across that ring and would not be denied. If Spence can paint the colors and play all the notes outside of the box, Spence can just keep pushing and get the job done. There is a will inside of him that seems to be special.
Yeah, and Ugas was I would say, very worthy adversary early in that fight. Like I said, Bud will kind of sort of sit back a little bit and make more diagnosis. So the difference is that Spence seems to have sort of a clear-eyed idea about what he wants to do, and it just takes some time to implement it. So that's what I mean in the sense of slow start versus slow start. Not exactly the same thing, because he was actually getting after early, but Ugas was taking it away. The big lesson there was, to your point, the competitive will of both of these guys. And in that sense, Spence on that night against Ugas was remarkable, obviously shutting his eye, doing phenomenal body work, solving another puzzle. If there was supposed to be signs of decline, I didn't see him that night.
Nobody told the truth, Errol Spence. We're going to find out. We're going to be tossing shortly to the press conference and the coverage in Los Angeles live. We will be on the back end to recap it with you. But just a reminder, if you're wondering where this fight takes place, how do I do it? It's Showtime pay-per-view, July 29th, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, the Undisputed Welterweight Championship. That's it for Luke Thomas and myself, Brian Campbell. We'll be with you on the back end afterwards. For now, though, let's toss it to our colleague, Brian Custer in Los Angeles. It's Spence versus Crawford.
Errol Spence Jr. is one of the best boxers on earth. And down goes Cal Brook. Errol Spence with some sweet combinations.
He is the winner by technical knockout.
You've got the 3 belts. What's next?
And now the unified welterweight champion of the world.
Everybody know who I want next. I want Terence Crawford next.
I do believe this is the perfect time. You got 2 great fighters in their prime for all the marbles. It's going to be an exciting fight. I just can't wait for it to happen.
That's the fight we all want to see.
There's been a back and forth a lot with you and Bud Crawford.
I don't know your number. Save it. I want all the smoke. But right now, I'm looking at Terence Crawford.
This is for Undisputed. This is a big moment for not only myself, but for Errol Spence Jr.
Saturday, July 29th, they're going to crown the first 4-belt Undisputed champion in 147-pound history.
The wait is over. Watch me fry this fish.
Yeah, I know what time it is, baby. Terence, I'm coming for that motherfucking belt.
And the first of our bi-coastal press conferences for the highly anticipated showdown for the Undisputed Welterweight Championship of the World, Spence Jr. versus Crawford. And now we invite the principals to the stage. And now making his way to the stage, the two-division world champion from Omaha, Nebraska. The renowned star of boxing and pound-for-pound great, undefeated in his 39 bouts with 30 wins by way of knockout. Here is the undisputed 140-pound world champion and the current undefeated WBO welterweight champion of the world, Terence "Bud" Crawford. And now making his way to the stage from DeSoto, Texas, the acclaimed star of the sport and popular pound-for-pound great. He is undefeated, 28 wins, no losses, 22 wins coming by way of knockout. Here is the current undefeated, unified WBA, WBC, and IBF welterweight champion of the world, the Truth, Errol Spence Jr. There they are, ladies and gentlemen, two of boxing's top pound-for-pound fighters facing off for the very first time ahead of their collision course. The showdown, scheduled July 29th at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Premier Boxing Champions presents Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence "Bud" Crawford, live on Showtime Pay-Per-View. And now we invite the fighters' respective teams to the stage at this time. Team Spence includes Derek James and Errol Spence Sr. And for Team Crawford, Brian Bomac McIntyre versus Esau Dieguez. And Esau Dieguez. And now my pleasure to hand the microphone duties over to today's host, Emmy Award-winning sportscaster. He's the host of Showtime Championship Boxing, Brian Custer.
Jimmy, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Certainly want to welcome you to the City of Angels, Los Angeles, Hollywood. This is the official press conference for Spence versus Crawford. As Jimmy mentioned, I'm Brian Custer, the host of Showtime Championship Boxing. Listen, this has been a momentous year for the sport, for Showtime Boxing. You know, we're regarded unequivocally as the undisputed broadcast leader in boxing because really our axiom is quite simple. Deliver the fights that people want to see, and that's the best fighting the best. You know, at the beginning of the year, we brought you David Benavidez, Caleb Plant. In April, well over 1 million people turned into Showtime pay-per-view to watch Tank Davis defeat Ryan Garcia. And now, it's time for one of the most anticipated fights of this decade. Spence versus Crawford. A super fight. Because you have champion versus champion. Both unbeaten. And sure, we may debate whether it should have happened last year, 5 years ago, but more importantly, it's now here. And they're both in their prime. And the winner is not only making history as the first undisputed welterweight champion in this four-belt era, but walks away with the crown as boxing's pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. The fight? Well, it's Saturday. It's July 29th. It's Showtime pay-per-view from T-Mobile Arena in the fight capital of the world. I'm talking about Las Vegas, Nevada. And it's really more than just a super fight. It's one of those era-defining fights in the spirit of Ali Frazier, Leonard Duran, Hagler Hearns, and of course Mayweather Pacquiao. It will enhance the legacy of both of these two elite champions while crowning the winner again as the sport's pound-for-pound best. This event is brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions. It's being promoted by Man Down Promotions as well as TGB Promotions as well. And it goes without saying, this is a fight. You want to be in the house. You want to tell your kids, I was there when Errol Spence Jr. took on Terence Bud Crawford. Tickets are available. You can get them. AXS.com. Again, AXS.com. The main event. Terence Bud Crawford, the WBO welterweight champion of the world. Unbeaten, 39-0. He's got 30 knockouts. Taking on the Truth, Errol Spence Jr., the unified WBA, WBC, and IBF welterweight champion of the world. His record unblemished as well. 28 wins, no defeats, 22 knockouts. Together they have an astounding combined record of 67 wins, 52 knockouts, no defeats. Let me introduce now one of the promoters who helped bring this thing together. He's the president of TGB Promotions. He's Tom Brown.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Brian. We also have TBC Promotions also as part of the promotion. I saw you looking. Well, good morning, everyone. Well, this is as big as it gets. The best two fighters in the world, both in their prime, and both undefeated world champions. Now, you can't emphasize this enough, but this is not just a mega fight. It's bigger than that. This is a generational fight. This will be an instant classic that you're going to remember for years to come. And as Brian said, legacies will be determined on July 29th. Now, not only is Errol Spence Jr. one of the very best fighters in the world, he's a boxing miracle with what he's gone through. And he's also box office gold. His last fight generated a massive live gate with more than 40,000+ fans at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas. And he's proven that he sells outside of Texas. He packed Staples Center back in 2019 with a crowd of more than 16,000 fans in attendance. And now he's coming to do the same in the boxing capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. So no more talk now about being on the wrong side of the street, who's on what side of the street. On Saturday, July 29th, Bud Crawford's going to be in one corner of the ring, and Errol Spence Jr. is going to be in the other corner. And when the fight's over, there'll be one man standing in the center of the ring with his arm raised and 4 belts strapped around him, and he will be the new undisputed pound-for-pound king of boxing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Let me introduce a man now who will give you more details, obviously, about the fight, all of the programming surrounding the televised pay-per-view portion of the evening as well. He's the president of Showtime Sports, Steven Espinoza.
Thanks, Brian. As Brian mentioned, it's a fantastic time to be a boxing fan. Boxing has never been hotter. Big fights, top fighters versus top fighters are happening more regularly than ever before, week after week. And there's one place where the biggest fights are happening, and happening more often than anywhere else. That's Showtime and Showtime pay-per-view. Together with our partners, Premier Boxing Champions and TGB Promotions, we've delivered the strongest schedule in the sport. More big fights, more often, week after week. This year, through July, we've scheduled 17 big-time boxing events. It's probably the strongest run of fights that we've had in the 37-year history of Showtime Boxing. It's not just 2023. You can go back a couple years, fight after fight, unification fights, undisputed title fights, sold-out arenas, coast-to-coast, pay-per-view records. And in the middle of this run, this great run of fights, this industry-leading schedule, we're thrilled to be delivering this once-in-a-generation fight. I don't need to sell the fight. It speaks for itself. Two of the best fighters in the sport fighting to make history. But in fact, if you were going to create the perfect fight, if you're going to describe what a perfect boxing match would be, it'd look a lot like this. You'd want two of the best fighters, two of the most skilled fighters in the sport. Check, we got that. Two fighters with knockout power, all action, aggressive, fan-friendly styles. Check. You'd want an evenly matched fight. So evenly matched that the betting odds are almost dead even. Got that too? You'd want high stakes, an undisputed world title fight, history on the line. You'd want some drama, a backstory, fighters who've overcome adversity, two fighters with big, enthusiastic fan bases. And you'd want history and legacy. And as Brian and Tom described, we've got that too. So here we are, the perfect fight. All the elements that any boxing fan could wish for, all in one mega fight. Of course, we'll take you behind the scenes, inside the lives of these two fighters. 3 episodes of the Emmy Award-winning All Access. First episode premieres Saturday, July 8th. Second episode premieres Saturday, July 15th. And of course, following the fight, the epilogue episode. We will see you July 29th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Steven. Let's hear from the camps. Start with TBC Promotions, Bud Crawford's camp. Before we bring up the next person to the podium, let me acknowledge he's the assistant trainer for Terence Bud Crawford, Mr. Isaú Diegues. Good to see you. We're coming to the podium now. He is the head trainer for the WBO champion of the world, Mr. Brian Bo-Mac McIntyre.
Hello, boxing world. How everybody doing? Good, that's good. First of all, I want to thank everybody. Spence, Derek James, Showtime, GTB. I want to spank that side over there, because obviously they looking at us like we the B side. That's all right. That's what we want. Glad they got this fight made. So glad. I'm glad both fighters stayed the course and stayed true to the game to show the world that who the best fighter is. And that just speaks true knowledge and true volumes about each fighter's character. But I will say this. We're going to show who the best fighter in the world is July 29th. It will be us. Don't miss it. I promise you, don't miss it. I know Spence is coming. I know Derek is going to train the shit out of you. I know his team going to do a damn good job over there. I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, we're going to walk away victoriously.
Bomac, thank you very much. Now to the man down promotion side of things. Let me acknowledge as well the father of the unified champ, Mr. Errol Spence Sr. See him in the house. Good to see you, sir. All right, coming to the podium now. What a year. He was the Boxing Writers Association Ring Magazine Trainer of the Year, Mr. Derek James.
No, I'm very happy to be here. And this is something that has been coming for a long, long time. A lot of talk, a lot of hearing a lot of speculation, people talking. So it's all about right now, it's about showing and proving. And something I can't wait. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of being asked questions about it. I know everybody on the stage tired of talking about it, tired of being asked questions about it. So it's time to get busy. That's all I care about, getting busy, seeing my guy go out there and doing everything he needs to do. He did what he said he was going to do, get those 3 belts. Now it's time to go get one more. One more. It's all about big fish right now. And I like you guys. But at the same time, hey, listen, we're really co-workers. Only way we can get this thing going, we got to work together. But night of the fight, it really is showtime for real. And we're going to make it happen. Thank you all.
Well, let's hear from the fighters. Let me bring to the podium. This man's got a 76% knockout percentage. Since he's moved up to welterweight, he has stopped every opponent he's faced. He's the former undisputed super lightweight champion of the world. He's the current WBO welterweight champion of the world. He is Terence "Bud" Crawford.
What's going on, everybody? Y'all don't look excited. I'm so excited that we're here today and that we're getting this fight done. I'm excited for you, the fans. I actually got a gift for each and every one of y'all. And why? Because I love y'all. Because without y'all, there's no us. So I'm going to give y'all a gift with the presence of myself and Errol, July 29th, so y'all can witness greatness. There will be greatness July 29th that you guys will witness. And how do we measure greatness? Us, you guys, we measure greatness by errors. You had the Sugar Ray Robinson error. You had the Ali error. The Marvin Hagler, the Tommy Hearns. You even had the Floyd Mayweather, his error. But July 29th, I'm going to show each and every one of y'all why. This error is the Terence Crawford error. Yeah! Yeah! Come fight night, he called himself the big fish, right? But what you do when the fish get took out the water, you suffocate him. Let's go.
Coming to the podium is a man who has a 78% knockout percentage. 6 of his last 7 opponents, former world champions. 3 of them, he took away their straps. He's the unified welterweight champion of the world. He's known as the Truth, Big Fish, Man Down, Errol Spence Jr.
I'd like to thank everybody for being here. This is the biggest fight I feel like in boxing right now. This is a legendary fight. This is definitely an old school fight. This is the fights that my dad used to talk to me about and older people tell me about, where you had Sugar Ray Leonard versus Tommy Hearns, you had Duran and all them, you had De La Hoya and Trinidad fighting. You had the best fighting the best. And finally, we at this point where, me and Terence Crawford had to get on the phone, talk about it, and now, it's finally happening. The best fighting the best. I feel like this is an old school fight, creme de la creme, and this is going to prove not only the best welterweight in the world, it's going to prove who the best fighter in the world is. If you know my mentality, it's to win, it's to go all out, give it everything. His mentality is the same thing. So I want everybody to tune in July 29th, come to the fight, because we're going to have a crawfish boil. So everybody make sure they're there, man. It's going to be enough for everybody, I promise you that.
Guys, let's talk about the fight. You know what? Let's start with the trainers first. Bomac, first question is quite simple. Can you tell the media, tell everybody who's watching, why is Terence Bud Crawford going to win this fight July 29th?
Well, I will tell you this, and why Terence is going to win the fight. Because he's the best fighter, and the world knows that. And if you just look how about he go about his business, there's no playing around with him. He come to get you out of there. Once he hurt you, that's a wrap. I'm sure I can get many former fighters that he done fought to come up here and back up what I'm saying. Now, I will tell you this. Errol's a damn good fighter. Damn good fighter. He accomplished a lot in the game, and I tilt my hat to him and his trainer, Derek. But the boxing world, the real fighters know, the real boxing fans know out there who's going to win this fight.
Derek James, same question. You enlighten us. Why will Errol Spence Jr. win this fight July 29th?
Well, I believe that Errol Spence will win the fight because of his depth. I believe his technique. I believe that his skill set. It's not so much about the gamesmanship of the show. He's a guy never talking, but a guy who goes in there and makes it happen and gets busy. And I think that what you'll see on July 29th is Errol Spence go out and yet again prove his dominance over another fighter. It's not so much about knocking somebody out. It's always about breaking somebody's will, breaking somebody else's desire to continue to fight. And that's what you'll see July 29th. Errol Spence breaking Terence Crawford's will.
Bud, we heard why you're going to win. I think we want to hear from you. What is a victory, though, on the 29th mean to you specifically? We know it comes as being undisputed. That would also mean you'd be the first fighter to be undisputed in 2 different weight classes. What would a victory on the 29th mean to you?
Well, like I said, that piggybacks on what I said before. It shows that I'm the greatest fighter of this era. No man have captured undisputed in 2 different weight classes.
Teofimo did last week.
Teofimo definitely wasn't. He was lineal, correction, but he wasn't undisputed. Sorry, Derek. Sorry, sir. You tried it. But yes, once again, I will be the first male boxer to actually capture the welterweight champion in 2 divisions, and that would solidify me as the greatest fighter of this era.
Definitely not, man. I'm not gonna lie, Tyron got the best matchmakers in the business. You ain't fought nobody, man. You haven't beat anybody undisputed at 140. Who you fought at 135, and who you fought at 147. Even you fought Sean Porter. Even Sean Porter said,
"What did I do to Sean Porter that you couldn't
Sean
do?"
Porter said he did not train like he should. He didn't do the things that his daddy told him to do. What are you talking about? Even his daddy said it. Even his daddy said it.
You butthurt that I got the
Even his daddy said it.
You butthurt.
Even Kell Brook, he was already broken.
So was he broken when you fought him?
No, he wasn't broken.
How come
I broke the other eye.
He came off of.
I broke the other eye. Yeah, that's how I got broke. That's how I got broke.
He came off a stoppage.
What does it matter?
He came off a stoppage, and then he fought you months.
What does it matter?
Months prior.
What does it matter?
So was he broken or not?
No, he wasn't broken. No, he wasn't broken.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
What are you talking about? I had the same surgery he had, and what happened? So what they say about you then? You fight me then?
I'm gonna break the other eye.
So what they say? So I'm broken then, right?
Well, you broken. You gonna be broken July 29th.
Yeah, we gonna see.
You gonna be broken.
So that begs the question, Errol.
Gonna see.
What does a win mean to you specifically on the 29th?
It just mean he's a great fighter. It just mean I broke another great fighter, Will, and I broke him down mentally, physically, and I came out on top.
Never.
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see.
You know, Errol, the interesting thing is you are the unified welterweight champion. You've taken away everyone's strap, it seems like, in this division, yet you're the Vegas underdog coming into this fight. Does that motivate you? Does that upset you? Your feelings on that?
Nah, I don't pay attention to it. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, everything I've been throughout these 2-3 years, I mean, I should be the underdog. But I mean, it is what it is, man. A lot of people become underdog and they end up winning, so that's why it's a bet.
They know what's gonna happen, that's why.
But I want to ask you about that. I loved it on social media. You characterized July 29th as a fish fry. Can you enlighten the people on what you meant by that?
I'm gonna gut them, and I'm gonna feed them to everybody that eat fish in here. You call yourself the big fish, we're gonna have enough food for everybody.
We'll see. We'll definitely see.
Put some potatoes on the side of it too.
Hey man, y'all go to ESJ.com, thetruth.com, and go buy that hot pack, man. We're gonna roll him up and smoke him in Vegas.
We'll see.
Errol?
We don't smoke over here.
It's legal in Vegas, man. We gonna roll him up and smoke him.
All we do is
man,
fish fillet.
We gonna roll him up and smoke him, man.
We go hunting over here, and best
like
believe
I said,
we hunting you
we
down.
gonna roll him up and smoke this dude.
Errol, you described it on social media as, quote, a one-sided ass whooping. I'm going to punish Terence Crawford.
That's how it always is. It's gonna be a one-sided ass whooping. I mean, he gonna come in with the mentality, and you know it's gonna probably take a few rounds, but he a stubborn dude. So, but we gonna, like I said, man, everybody get broke. We gonna break him, man. We gonna break him like a horse.
I'm ready.
What are people going to say? Because this fight has been so anticipated. Once it's over, what do you think people are going to say about the fight, and what are they going to say about Bud Crawford?
They're going to say Bud Crawford is special. And all the people that thought he was going to do what he say he was going to do, they're going to say, wow, we was wrong about that kid. He is special. He is great. That's what they're going to walk away saying. This boy is great. And I can assure you that. And he'll give me my respect after the fight. Right now, he in the mode of...
I give you your respect now.
No.
I give you your respect now.
I'm talking about when I whoop that ass, you going to really
I give you your respect now. I give you your respect now.
Damn.
You great right now.
I'm going to have to do it again. But
like the rest of them. Simon Hearns, all them dudes are great. Marvin Harris, Durant, all them guys are great, man. But, hey, man, sometimes dudes get broke.
And the same question to you, Errol. What are they going to be saying about this fight and about Errol Spence Jr. after July 29th?
How the hell Errol Spence keep breaking these men, these grown-ass men?
So here we go. Last question for me, for you guys. Start with you, Big Fish. For the thousands that have packed T-Mobile Arena, for the millions that are going to buy it on Showtime pay-per-view, what can you guarantee these people they're going to get on July 29th?
I guarantee you a great action-packed, old-school type fight. If you've been craving one of those fights from the 70s, 80s, early 90s, you got to tune into this fight, man. This is a legendary fight. I feel like, you know, belts aside, all that type stuff. I'm talking about, you talk about Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. This is the biggest fight in boxing, period, especially action-packed wise. If you know his mentality, you know my mentality, you already know, man, we going for the victory, but a tough victory. I know he's not going to try to break. I'm definitely not breaking. So it's gonna be an all-out war. I think it's gonna be tactical in the first couple of rounds, but as the rounds go on, you know what I'm saying, I'm gonna try to break his will. He's gonna try to break my will, and we both gonna go for the victory. Everybody tune in July 29th. Is gonna be a all-out war, action-packed fight, and you're gonna want to tune in to this fight because this fight is gonna be talked about for decades.
I know I said it, but they were my words. I want your response to that. You believe the winner, pound for pound, best fighter in the world?
The winner of this fight is definitely the best fighter in the world. I mean, pound for pound, that's all, you know, I don't know how they judge that, but everybody know this the best fighter in the world, whoever wins this fight. This creme de la creme, this the best fighter in the world, no questions asked, no nothing. So make sure everybody tune into this fight.
Bud Crawford, same question to you. For all those thousands of people who will come out to T-Mobile Arena, spend their hard-earned money, buy the pay-per-view on Showtime pay-per-view, what can you guarantee they're going to get on July 29th?
I can guarantee everybody is going to witness something special that night. Errol Spence, he don't like to back up. I'm the type of fighter where you push, I push even harder. You hit me, I want to fight even harder. He got a big heart. I got a big heart. He loved to fight. I love to fight. And it just makes for a great action-packed fight with a lot of, you know, excitement in it. So July 29th is going to be a great night for boxing. I feel like this is definitely a legacy fight and a fight that should be talked about in the whole boxing community, if it's not all through the social medias outlets. But I do believe that this is an old school type fight where, you know, you got all the greats fighting each other. Like I said, in this era, this is the greats fighting each other. So yeah, tune in July 29th. Buy the fight if you can't be there.
Who it. All right, I know we got some questions from members of the media. All we ask is that you identify yourself, tell us who you're with, and ask your question.
How you doing? Tyler Tynes from the Los Angeles Times. Just wondering, for Bud first, what took so long for y'all to finally come together and do the fight?
Listen, it doesn't matter what took so long. All that matters is we here now. I'm excited. Everybody else excited. And July 29th, myself and Errol Spence will be sharing the ring together and putting on a great show for each and every one of you guys.
Hi, Terence. Lance Pugmire, ppv.com. Thank you guys for being here today. I just wanted to ask you, Terence, obviously you've really earned the reputation of being the sport's best finisher. Can you describe in detail what happens when you see that moment that you need to kill the opponent or knock him out? What takes over?
Well, I don't know. It's an inner bulldog in me. You know, when I see that blood, when I see weakness, I just go for the kill. I'm pretty sure all types of great fighters got that instinct that when they see one of their opponents hurt or wounded, they go for the kill.
Thank you.
Greg Rosenstein, The Athletic. For Errol, you two have both been compared constantly over the years in the division and on pound-for-pound lists. What specific skill sets do you see you having the advantage over Terence?
Man, I got a lot of skill sets I feel like advantages over him. But at the end of the day, I feel like this fight is basically so even. You know, it's going to be more about just being more focused and, you know, not getting out of focus, especially in the later rounds, just making sure, staying on point all throughout the fight and making sure you don't lose focus, because that's how you end up getting caught.
Errol Kakopian with the BoxingScene.com. You're going to be coming off a nearly 16-month layoff. Are you concerned your time away from the ring will impact your preparation and your performance come fight night?
I've been off longer, so, I mean, a 16-month layoff, that's cool. I mean, it was nothing I was recovering from, so that was more rest anyway. I mean, it ain't like the other times where it was a car crash or a retina surgery, something like that. So it'll be fine. Definitely be fine.
Hi, folks, we got one more? Yep. One more.
Hi, guys. Marcus Hayes, Fight Hub TV. I want to ask this question for both Errol and Terence. I've heard that you guys spend a lot of time FaceTiming and communicating to make this bout happen. What's something that you guys learned about each other in your private conversations?
You're just talking about family and, you know, situations and stuff like that, but, you know, just getting the feel out for each other. So, I mean, you learn a couple of things, but, I mean, we were just talking, feeling each other out.
Well, I would say the same. You know, Errol's probably outside of right now, probably a cool dude, but I feel as if both of us was mature enough to get on the phone and talk to one another, to be able to sit here and make the fight for each and every one of you fans.
Fantastic. There you have it, folks. July 29th, T-Mobile Arena. AXS.com is where you can get your tickets. A super fight. Champion versus champion. Both unbeaten, both in their primes. Spence versus Crawford. Guys, let's get the entire camps up here. Let's take some pictures. Thank you, everybody. This is for the Undisputed Welterweight Championship of the World.
You see it live in Los Angeles for the first time. Errol Spence Jr.,
So
Terence
Crawford
Crawford,
line up for
face to face. as we build toward July 29th. Welcome back in. I'm Brian Campbell. Luke Thomas, the co-host, of course, of Showtime's award-winning digital series, Morning Combat. And Luke, if the participants' comments are any indication, July 29th in Las Vegas is going to be a big party. We got fried fish. We got mashed potatoes. We got a lot of history on the line.
Crawfish.
Crawfish as well. What did you learn from seeing these two great ones talk about what's at stake here?
Sometimes you go to these pressers and you're surprised by one person's energy or approach to the event more so than the next. I felt like this one went about like I expected it. I'm betting you did as well. I mean, here's the thing. Like I said, you don't need to say anything too crazy to sell this. You don't have to shove someone at any kind of face-off. Anyone who knows anything about boxing wants to be there, and then most people who have some idea about boxing are going to want to be there as well. So it's more about just raising awareness about dates and ticket places and all that kind of stuff, which was great. It was fine. And then guys kind of like asserting their line in the sand. A lot of "we will see," a lot of metaphors about cooking, but no one getting over the line. In fact, both guys also being somewhat reserved about talking to each other on FaceTime. They didn't go heavy into that as well. They played it down the middle, right? A little bit spicy, perhaps, but calm enough to be rational and deliver it on a professional event.
You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the rare super fight in this era where it's not about the build-up, like you said, the trash talk, the pushing. It's not about I'm building toward that night, but I'm really entertained by the what if and the build, and that it's about the guarantee that come fight night, these two are going to deliver. I mean, look, the recurring theme on this press conference in step one, day one, Los Angeles, obviously tomorrow, day two, Times Square in New York City, we'll be there with you. But the recurring theme was old school. And like Terence Crawford, Errol Spence said multiple times, this is the fight your dad, your grandpa, used to tell you about from the 70s, the 80s, the early 90s. And look, what they mean by that is those fights had big fanfare at certain times based on the personality, but it was that guarantee that when the best ultimately face the best, something special will happen. You will see greatness, as Crawford said. I can't echo this enough if you want something to get excited about, how about the fact that in addition to how great these fighters are, their resumes, the titles at stake, they do not take a back step. They are willing, able, capable, dangerous finishers. If they sent one message during this press conference to me as a fan / journalist / consumer / all those things, it's that if you tune in July 29th, you will see something special because they're both not taking a step back. They will be fighting to the finish to make history happen. That's not every big fight you come across at the end of the day. It's not that same mentality. They're as skilled to go 12 rounds and box a chess match. They're also as willing to do a 12-round war if they need to. That's special. There's something there.
No doubt about it. I mean, these two guys are here because they're accepting big-time risk. Now, these are not guys who take risk stupidly or without thought. Everything here is carefully planned. Both sides are strategizing what's the right time to take this fight. Of course, they took it now, but I mean to say all of the events that led to what we're into today have all been carefully thought about. The fight itself on both sides will be carefully thought about, but ultimately, these guys are putting themselves in harm's way for our entertainment, for their legacy, for the belts, for history, for who's the best guy in the entire sport. They're willing to put themselves not merely in somewhat vulnerable positions, but really vulnerable positions, really risking it in a very meaningful way. Like the loser here definitely is giving up something. A lot of times we like to talk about it metaphorically in boxing, like there is no loser, or, in combat sports, like the guy who lost performed so ably, there's something redemptive. And there certainly might be a part of that I don't want to lose sight of when you have two excellent operators here. But the winner is going to get to a place that the loser is dreading, not even letting themselves contemplate. And because they're in that mental space, those are the lines in the sand you saw about what we're going to see, pledges to one another about July 29th.
Like people fight for different reasons. Sometimes it's about the fame, the money. For these two, they have the fame and the money. This is about mano a mano. Who's better? Who will be in the history books as the one who has won this rivalry, and who will be the bridesmaid of that relationship? Let's talk about what we saw in that press conference, though. You didn't need the trash talking or pushing. We didn't have all that for the most part, but there was some flexing. Errol Spence Jr. didn't hide it, Luke. He said, Terence Crawford, you may have been great at 135, 140, but who have you fought at 147? Now, to be fair, Terence Crawford has fought and defeated big names like Sean Porter. He won the title from Jeff Horn. There were big names, maybe not in the prime position of their careers, like an Amir Khan or a Kell Brook. Is that just to get in the head of Terence Crawford, to try to say ahead of time, hey, I'm Errol Spence, you can look at my resume. you may have looked great against those guys, but you come into the deep end against me, it will be different. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for that. Obviously, they talked about what would happen if Bud became an undisputed champion once again, this time at 147, and how unique that would be. But the 147 campaign, and again, there is some debate about this. I don't mean to suggest that there's not, but I think that there is a good argument to make that if you look at the 147 campaign that kicked off for Bud Crawford, I think 6 or 7 fights ago, whatever it is at this point, that's not necessarily as strong, I think, in my mind and the minds of some other folks, as what Errol Spence turned in. But as we've kind of indicated, BC, that is, I think, a fair point to bring up. Either guy's going to try and find the slightest edge. And you mentioned that line in the sand, or that argument anyway, was made by Errol Spence. But then what was the first thing that Crawford said? Right, but we both fought Sean Porter. What happened there? Like, they really all know the slight weaknesses in the resume, the slight weakness in performance, and of course, they're not going to show their whole hand about their strategy. But dude, these are two guys who have paid attention to what the other one has done. They might be able to take pot shots at it, but it's only because they're very familiar with it. You can tell they have been observing from the sidelines what these guys, what one another has been up to. Now that they clash, it will be interesting because they're going to find out something new about one another. But make no mistake, these are well-studied opponents of each other.
Yeah, well, neither man for 4 or 5 years hasn't gone in front of a microphone or crossed paths with a boxing fan and not be asked about fighting one another. You saw Terence Crawford say he doesn't want to talk about the past and why it didn't happen before. Now is the time. It is happening. And I like what Tom Brown of TGB Promotions said. All the talk for years about opposite sides of the street, enough of that. I mean, look, if we're being honest, they come from opposite sides of the street, but they're going to meet in the middle of the intersection, T-Mobile Arena, come July 29th. Not a lot of talk about strategy, and to your point, keeping it close to the vest. Do you think there's a message, though, in what Errol Spence ultimately said about drowning Terence Crawford? And I ask that because both fighters can fight both ways. Both are great finishers. Both have made big adjustments multiple times in big fights. But the Spence who outboxed Mikey Garcia was different in strategy and intention than the Spence who last time out 16 months ago walked down, broke the face of champion Yordenis Ugas. Is this Errol Spence trying to get out ahead of it and say, look, the difference between us will be the dog factor. It will be that in this fight, I'm coming after you, and I believe that I can be the last man standing in that type of situation.
I think so. I mean, he almost said it explicitly, right? Talking about, like, what's the difference between them as boxers. You know, he had a lot of respect to pay him right there verbally, but he kept saying he was going to break him. He was going to break him like a horse, I think, was the statement that he made. And so when you think about that, it's
That's a Texan talking about.
Yeah, it certainly is. He's not saying he's necessarily all that much better than Crawford as a boxer, or at least certainly a pure boxer. What he's just saying is by the time either the one guy falls or the final bell rings at the end of the 12th, he'll have just done the work to put it on the other guy. I mean, there's a certain, even in other combat sports like wrestling, which, by the way, Bud Crawford has a background in, there's a certain level of just, of certain guys can win with, yes, technical innovation, but intensity and will and focus. And he also mentioned that, maintaining the game plan, sticking to the focus the entire time. It just sounded to me like whatever the differences in our skill or our approach, I'm just going to keep hammering until you eventually just turn into a nail.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is we haven't seen either of these guys obviously be broken. They're both undefeated, but they're the ones who walk you down over time or make the adjustments and figure it out. And then obviously we know how Spence can finish, but Terence Crawford is a nasty finisher.
I was just going to say, wouldn't you agree, and if you don't, by all means, please say so, but Terence is this sort of waves crash, Errol Spence, the waves crashing into the shore. For Terence, he's almost going to, yes, he can be violent as well, but there's a certain level of finesse that comes over with what he's doing, which is slightly different.
Until he zeroes in, though. Once he figures that out and has that opportunity and finds that opening, Terence Crawford steps in, sits down on his punches, and has a bevy of late knockouts to prove for that. We heard from both trainers, Brian Bomack McIntyre in Terence Crawford's corner, and of course Derek James, the defending reigning trainer of the year. Luke, you couldn't ask with two better minds behind the scenes, both respectful of what's on the other side. But it's going to be interesting. Are we going to be seeing them game planning in every possible way, or in some ways just going out there and reading what their opponent does? I mean, when you have two fighters who literally can fight every style and adapt to every style, sometimes you just got to roll out the balls, like they say in basketball, and go out there and figure it out. I'm wondering who comes in with a game plan that's different than normal, or is it just let's put these two out there and see what happens?
I mean, you definitely want to stick to what you do well. And when you get into questions about individual pieces of the matchup, one thing to note, of course, is that if you just go back and look at the history of Bud Crawford fighting other southpaws, he fights them southpaw. So this will be really, or for the most part, obviously, there's a little bit of exception to that, but you get the idea. So the question you have to ask yourself first is, okay, let's talk about southpaw versus southpaw situations and what those look like for Bud Crawford. Or does he change that up? Because part of what Errol Spence is really good at is getting through with his jab, and the jab can be slightly easier to neutralize from open stance, something we saw with Tank Davis, obviously against Ryan Garcia, and many other cases as well when you have a southpaw versus orthodox fighter. They could throw a wrench in the game plan that way, but I tend to think not. I tend to think that this is going to be each guy knows their very particular skills, and what you're going to see the trainers try and do is put them in a space to take away those conditions, whether it's certain weapons they wish to take away, certain circles, certain directions they want to circle, certain real estate they want to take away, how much pressuring footwork, how much retreating footwork, how much leading footwork, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be a tall task for the trainers and obviously for the fighters, but I can't echo enough that old school label, the willingness right up front of both fighters. You know, you can believe them when they say they're going to do whatever it takes to get to that finish line and get their hand raised. I mean, Luke, that's why we still talk about Sugar Ray Leonard against Thomas Hearns and the late rally and the big knockout and the win for Leonard and all these classics down the board. It's rare. I mean, this one. I mean, how do you describe that feeling when you look at this matchup? It just feels different.
This was the fight. I've told you this off air. I've told you this on air any number of times. This is certainly verifiable. Of all of the fights that could be made in boxing and frankly wider combat sports, this was the one I wanted the most. This was the one that meant the most. This was the one that had the highest level of skill. This was the one that had, frankly, some of the better narratives that you could make for a fight, just given how good both of these guys are. We mentioned everything about them being, they're in their 30s, 33 versus 35, and they're still undefeated.
Yeah.
We're talking about a guy in Bud Crawford who might be able to go undisputed across multiple weight classes. This is just a level of boxing and combat sports you're just not going to get, but basically every 10 years or so. Now, obviously, Mayweather-Pacquiao was about 7 or so, but you get what I'm talking about. It is generational. It is huge, long gaps in the sport before something like this is even possible. People conceive of it very early and then trick themselves into thinking it's ready. It just takes time, as I indicated, with stakes this high to do something that impressive. But you're asking what it feels like. It feels like, honestly, now that it's here, the sport, with all those feelings we had about how incomplete we would feel if it never happened, those are starting to go away a little bit. The mystery of what is to come obviously is still there, but I mean, this is what, there are certain moments in your fandom in boxing that you remember exactly where you were whenever something went down, what you were wearing, what you said to people that night, who you were with, maybe what you were drinking, who knows. But they stick with you forever. They live with you forever. This is that fight. Again, I don't want to put it in a place that it can't live up to, BC. But I just want to say, like, when you just look on paper, what is going to be one of those nights in your boxing fandom life that you remember for the rest of your days? These are those kinds of fights. Well, it is Spence versus Crawford.
It's the stakes, it's the skills, but it's the intentionality. It's the willingness to get in there and build their legend, make it happen. Sometimes in boxing too often, we didn't end up seeing fighter A fight fighter B. It's an ongoing barbershop debate for the rest of our lives. This one, thankfully, will be settled in the ring July 29th, T-Mobile Arena, and of course only on Showtime pay-per-view. So this was day one, Los Angeles, West Coast. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. start in the East on the Showtime Sports YouTube channel. It's going to go down in Times Square in New York City. Luke, we're going to be on the grounds there. Same venue that we were just a few months ago with Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis for that big one. Day two, a little more fireworks, a little more... What are we expecting here?
A little more jet lag. We're going to have some jet lag getting over here. Yeah, I think it actually might be a little spicier. If you recall the Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia one, opening presser, which they did it backwards. They did it in New York, then LA. The New York one was pretty normal-ish, and then they got in each other's faces, and even Tank Davis put the fist in his face in the second night. Yeah, I think there's just something a little bit more feisty about round two. We'll see how
This
it goes.
has already been a big year for boxing, already been a big year for Showtime Boxing. Who can forget, of course, the Caleb Plant, David Benavidez pay-per-view from a few months back, the monster summit of the future stars of tomorrow with Gervonta Tank Davis against Ryan Garcia. But you see right there the upcoming calendar from Showtime Sports. And Luke, it's all building up, of course, to that main course, July 29th. But the journey along the way, unbeaten Tim Tszyu with the interim title at 154 pounds, taking on Carlos Ocampo. How about Carlos Adames at middleweight making big noise? He has Julian Williams in front of him. And how about another big name in this division? Yes, you've got Crawford versus Spence for this era. Jaron Boots Ennis. Could be this era's fighter, could be next era's fighters, could be the era after that. He'll be taking on Royman Villa July 8th. You have to believe someone like Boots Ennis, who's waiting for his moment, could be watching this fight July 29th a little bit closely.
Oh, no doubt about it. Both of those guys, Villa and Ennis, were on the Washington, D.C. That was the Tank Davis-Hector Garcia fight. We were both there in attendance in my hometown. And I recall, obviously, it was a really great night for Villa, who overcame Speedy Rashidi Ellis in a very difficult outing. He won that one kind of late. And Jaron Ennis, who I think has been the future of boxing, he certainly performed well, but maybe not quite totally up to everyone's very, very high expectations. Villa is shot out of a cannon. Tough fight, but a fun challenge in either direction, especially for the still surging Jaron Boots Ennis.
Just a number of offerings this spring and summer here on Showtime. Big time boxing. And when we're talking about the boxing scene at large, Showtime also, did you see this Fight Towns episode? The host is Steven Jackson, All the Smoke, 2003 NBA champion.
I know you did.
Our colleague went down to Houston. If you didn't check this episode out, you should. Raul Marquez, Jermall Charlo, Jermel Charlo, Oshaki Foster, Regis Prograis. So many great fighters that Steven Jackson broke bread with, got in the ring and trained with. Don't miss this. It's available now on Showtime Sports YouTube channel. I'm a big Stack guy.
Stack is hard to dislike. I mean, it takes a lot to dislike him. But what I would say is he did a great job with this. Showtime obviously did a great job. You know, it's a few interesting sort of confluence of factors that made Houston what it is as this really interesting fight town. And it was important to just go. Sometimes everyone knows like these fight towns like Philly, which are just sort of perennial ones. But there's some newer hot spots that have developed over the years. Houston being one for boxing is one, and I'm glad we had a chance to go and see
2 episodes already of Fight Towns, Philadelphia, Houston. Don't miss them. You can check them out. I'm waiting for Fight Towns.
That's right. There's some decent work over there in Nation's Capital.
Check in on the Peterson brothers and all that, and then some. Luke, also, I don't know if you missed it, started streaming on June 2nd. You can catch it now on Showtime platforms. It was a documentary. Andre Ward, SOG, The Book of Ward. It's streaming right now on Showtime on the Paramount Plus app. Did you get a chance to check
this one? I have not seen yet. One of the greatest fighters, retired undefeated, 2-division champion in this sport's history, and let's not forget, had his first major moment outside of winning gold medal at the 2004 Olympics on Showtime when he won the Super 6 World Boxing Classic. But to look back on the behind the scenes and cameras trailing him all those years, you'd be surprised how many injuries we didn't know about that Ward fought through. Also, Ward's personal life, the turmoil with his parents growing up, the drugs, all the things in his life that he somehow put aside, put one of the best careers on track. We've never seen him this honest. I mean, when you look at Andre Ward, great fighter, great broadcaster, typically keeps things close to the vest. This was him opening that up, and I think you're going to enjoy it, Luke. So check it out streaming. Now, are you recommending this not only because it is excellent, but also because you are in it?
Yeah, there was a nice 2014 cameo from a very young BC right there, so don't miss that. Check that out. Day 2 of the press tour, as I mentioned, will go down tomorrow, 11 a.m. in the East, 8 a.m. Pacific time on the Showtime Sports YouTube channel. We'll be there from Times Square. Luke, as we look back at day 1, Spence Crawford, we talked about our reactions. They're not big trash talkers. They're not big sellers. We talked about it. They sell in the ring. You watch their performances. That sells it. It was kind of nice though to see them a little bit, a little
chirping a little bit
back and forth. Even if it's a little bit out of character. We've always known Bud as a man of few words, but we're finally here, and you could see a little bit of that joy shine through just the same for
Listen,
both
I
fighters.
remember very distinctly when they had I think it was a 2-day or even just it was a very, very short Mayweather-Pacquiao media tour. And there was
one stop.
It was one stop. I remember this distinctly. And I remember folks asking, why wouldn't they do more? It's a big fight. And they're like, right, they don't need to.
Yeah.
They just don't need to.
We've had 5 years of commercials for this one, right?
Now, of course, Manny and Floyd were enormous pay-per-view stars in a very different way than almost any other boxer ever has been. But you get the idea. When fights are like this, you don't have to say a whole lot.
No, you don't. The excitement that I feel right now says all I need to hear.
I believe you.
I'm fired up. July 29th, Showtime pay-per-view, of course, presented by Premier Boxing Champions. You're not going to want to miss this in Las Vegas, T-Mobile Arena. The fight, the big one that we've been waiting for. All 4 world titles in the welterweight division, pound for pound at stake and all that. This has been Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell, and you can catch us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 a.m. in the East start time, live programming, all the mixed martial arts and boxing previews, reviews, breakdowns, interviews you could want. It's called Morning Combat, the award-winning Showtime Sports digital series. You can go to youtube.com/Morning Combat with a K for much more. Luke, this about wraps up our journey today here in the Jersey City, New Jersey studios. The 2 unbeaten champions will be on the plane. Maybe a little red eye, right? Think they get first class, like the bed seat, stretch it out a little bit? Are we going private jet? What are we doing here?
I mean, I listen, bare minimum first class. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you. Bare minimum first class, Brian Campbell.
There it is. We will be with you tomorrow, day 2 from Times Square in New York City. Do not miss it. The fight we've all been waiting for, Spence versus Crawford. For Luke Thomas, I'm Brian Campbell, and our Showtime colleagues in Los Angeles signing off now. Catch us tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern, on the Showtime Sports YouTube channel as we continue to set the stage to July 29th. We'll see you tomorrow.
Errol Spence Jr. is one of the best boxers on planet Earth. And down goes Cal Brook. Errol Spence with some sweet combinations.
He is the winner by technical knockout.
You've got the 3 belts. What's next?
And now the unified welterweight champion of the world.
Everybody know who I want next. I want Terence Crawford next.
I do believe this is the perfect time. You got 2 great fighters in their prime for all the marbles. It's going to be an exciting fight. I just can't wait for it to happen.
That's the fight we all want to see.
There's been a back and forth a lot with you and Bud Crawford.
I don't know your number. Save it. I want all the smoke. But right now, I'm looking at Terence Crawford.
This is for Undisputed. This is a big moment for not only myself, but for Errol Spence Jr.
Saturday, July 29th, they're going to crown the first 4-belt undisputed champion in 147-pound history.
The wait is over. Watch me fry this fish.
Yeah, I know what time it is, baby. Terrence, I'm coming for that motherfucking belt.
When it's time to get it in, I ain't the one to mess with.
Bellator returns with a double title fight tilt. Light heavyweight champ Vadim Nemkov is on a collision course.
Ain't no way to stop us when we hit ignition.
With the most terrifying fighter in MMA, Yoel Romero.
What a monster!
Plus, bantamweight champ Sergio Pettis.
Pettis, spectacular!
Faces Bellator GOAT Patricio Pitbull.
Ain't no way to stop us when we on a mission.
Bellator MMA, Nemkov versus Romero, and Pettis versus Pitbull. Friday on Showtime.
Andre, whoa!
You have to understand what I've been through. All of it made me into the man that I am today.
32-0, his brother Andre Ward was great.
I'm going to do things my way. I wanted to have a body of work, not just in the ring, but as a man.
Only thing you ain't done in boxing is lose.
SOG, The Book of Ward, only on Showtime, streaming with Paramount+.